Good morning, Year 11. Literature Recall Challenge number 9. The answers. Are you ready? Let's go. So, Romeo and Juliet, guess who is speaking or who is being described? These violent delights have violent ends is, of course, Friar Lawrence. Peace, I hate the word as I hate hell, all Montagues and thee, is, of course, the fiery Tybalt. And Romeo's a dish clout to him is, of course, the nurse speaking about Paris. Now, question number 2. I've not written any answers to these because it's a very personal answer. The task was for you to think of some answers for your opinion on whether or not we should provide charity for poor people, quite a controversial task, and for you to provide two conflicting opinions. So on one hand we should provide charity and on the other hand we shouldn't. So I'm not going to go through what answers you should have given because I don't think that personally would be right. However, what I have put on the answers is for you to think about how you would express these opinions with connectives. So of course you've got on the other hand, but the other connectives you would use to describe your opinions, to connect them, would be on the other hand, however, whereas, of course, on the other hand, yet, unlike, and to give some conflicting opinions in the connectives. Okay, but I'm not going to go through those because I didn't think it was right because it's quite a controversial topic. Okay, so give me 3 examples of dramatic irony in Mr. Burling's after dinner conversation. So you would need to make sure you understood what dramatic irony was before you were able to do that, and this would be where the audience would know more than the actors on the stage. So you need to understand that Inspector Calls was written in the mid-1940s, but it is set in the early 1910s. So obviously you've got the World War settings, and the audience will be able to look back and be able to reflect on history with what the characters on the stage are saying. So first of all, you have Titanic, unsinkable, absolutely unsinkable, and as we all know, Leonardo didn't make it. So the audience will know that the Titanic sinks, and he's clearly unwise about the Titanic. And the reason why he says that is because he wants to be involved in the shipbuilding community, in all those rich, wealthy businessmen. He wants to be involved in that. He wants to be part of that. So that's why he says that line, because he wants to be associated with those kind of rich businessmen and successful businessmen. His naivety about the war. Nobody wants the war. He says something about the Kaiser. I can't remember the exact quote, but of course late 1940s, have just come out of World War II. They're just about to go into World War I when the play is set. So he's very naive about the political and situation in the world at the time the play is set. He also describes socialists as some sort of cranks. Now, when the play is being released and being performed, Labour has just won a landslide victory, Labour being the socialist political party. So he's therefore dismissing them as some sort of cranks, yet the audience sitting there is part of a community, a national group who have just voted in a socialist parliament. So he's rather naive about the success in the future of the socialist political party. So dramatic devices used in the play: lighting, pink and intimate, and then hard and bright when the inspector enters because he's going to interrogate them. Entrances and exits of characters, stage directions, really important that you pay attention to those. Those are 3 really key ones. You could just have had those 3. But to stretch the top grades, think about that dramatic arc, the introduction, the character introduction, and that pyramid of the dramatic structure. The technical term of it is a Freytag's pyramid, Freytag structure. And I'm going to put a little link. It will appear here somewhere up there at the top when I publish this video to a little revision video if you want to look into more details about this. And the ending, you would expect some kind of resolution. You would expect it all to tie up neatly at the end, and of course in this play it doesn't. We're left with that. Well, what is it? Okay, so that was a really clever way of structuring the play that J.B. Priestley uses. And also another one is the fourth wall, and this is a dramatic device used by playwrights, and you've got to imagine there's an invisible wall between the actors on the stage and the audience sat in the theatre. And when the inspector says his almost prophetic speech at the end, his sermon about fire, blood and anguish, you've almost got to imagine that wall being broken down. And he's not just performing as an inspector anymore, he's almost transforming himself into J.B. Priestley, and he's almost preaching to the audience, preaching to the people of Britain, and he's giving his message to the people about how we should be and our morals and how we should behave towards each other. So this fourth wall is an invisible wall that almost, when it's up, it's just characters on the stage and people in an audience, and they're watching it through a glass wall, and it makes whatever is behind it it's just fake, it's just pretend. But when it's broken down, the audience become involved and they become part of what is on the stage. And when the inspector does his great big speech at the end, it breaks down. You've got to imagine almost it physically dropping down. I think I've got that across. Okay, so the next bit, in adjectives to describe Inspector Goole: imposing, direct. Think of those descriptions of him right at the beginning. It doesn't have to be massive and bulky, that's not what I mean, but imposing as in his presence, and he's very direct the way he speaks to them. Very articulate, so he can express himself very clearly. He's interrogative but not in an aggressive way. He gets the information out of them that he wants to get out of them. Ominous, you could say supernatural if you want. You remember, if you look at his name, Goole and Ghoul. And ambiguous at the end. We don't know what he is, who he is. Is he real, is he not real? Does it matter? No. Which leads me on to the next bit, differences between Sheila and Gerald by the end. So Sheila thinks it doesn't matter if the inspector was real or not, unlike Gerald. Remember, Gerald arrives at the end and is found out that the inspector isn't really an inspector, and he thinks well, doesn't matter then. Whereas Sheila thinks it doesn't matter, it's irrelevant. Sheila accepts responsibility for her actions towards Eva Smith, unlike Gerald, who doesn't. And Sheila genuinely cares about Eva Smith and the basic morality of what they did, whereas Gerald thinks because the inspector wasn't real that he's got away with it, and that's fine, that's okay, let's just move on and let's get engaged then. But of course Sheila hands back the engagement ring because she feels like she can't go back to how things were. Okay, so quite a detailed one on the inspector calls there. So if you don't know any of those, you could go back and have a look, and you could check out that video on the narrative arc and Freytag's pyramid if you want. Good luck. Questions for week 10, double figures, are coming up. Well done, Year 11.